Hi, and welcome back to ScottiesTech.Info. I'm Scotty with my co-host Cletus, and today I want to talk about China. I'm sure you've heard about all this. There's been all this stuff in the news, and there's some Huawei executive who was arrested in Canada, and they're going to be extradited to the U.S. and all kinds of stuff. And on top of all that, of course, there's the stuff about how you shouldn't use a Huawei smartphone, and it's all kind of interesting because Huawei became the number 2 smartphone manufacturer in 2018, last year. And they beat out even Apple. Samsung is number 1, now Huawei is number 2. And Huawei doesn't make only smartphones. They make smartphones, tablets, and they also make telecom equipment, like the type of equipment that forms the backbone of the internet. They're also involved in developing and selling technology for the glorious new 5G network that's going to be deployed everywhere in the near future. So, as I said, they develop equipment for the backbone of the internet, like giant fancy routers and that sort of thing. And of course, the concern is that what we're told is that, well, but it's a Chinese company, and so it's, suddenly people start talking about the People's Liberation Army of China and the evil Chinese government, and so, of course, you're not supposed to use this stuff because they might be spying on you. China might be spying on you. Okay, so the first thing to understand is that all equipment that forms the backbone of the internet, it's all got backdoors in it. Almost 20 years ago now, I worked for a telecom equipment manufacturer in the United States. And we made optical transport switches, which are basically enormous multiple racks of equipment, and there's all these giant cards you slide in, and basically it's a huge rack of equipment, and you have fiber optic cables, multiple fibers running in, multiple fibers running out. That forms literally the fiber optic backbone of the internet, very high speed connections. And then from these boxes, you can pull out other different types of connections like gigabit Ethernet and slower fiber and all kinds of different stuff. So there's software that runs on it and makes it all go. So in order to create this software, you have software requirement documents. And a big part of the software requirements was a rather interesting chunk of text, many, many pages long, that basically specified that all this equipment by law must include back doors. And of course, all the, everybody I worked with, they were all kind of like a little bit of like wink, wink, nudge, nudge. But these back doors are only used if you get a warrant from a U.S. court. Only ever used if you get a warrant. Which, yeah, I mean, given all the whistleblower stuff and the data dumps and, all this stuff that's come out over the past several years and Google hoovering stuff up, you can watch my video on, I did one on how even in airplane mode, phones are hoovering up data, position of the phone, acceleration, and sending it off to Google servers. And of course, you can calculate from that exactly what's going on with the phone. Also, if you've read the book Surveillance Valley by Yasha Levine, you understand. I've also talked about that in videos and also in articles on my website, ScottiesTech.Info. If you've read that book Surveillance Valley, you understand that companies like Google and Facebook, they kind of came into being and were funded with venture capital with the help of essentially intelligence agencies like the NSA, whatever. And it's kind of an integral part of, what they do. There have always been backdoors, there has always been cooperation, and that's one of the reasons they became successful. And it's not unusual obviously, American telecom manufacturers do that. French telecom manufacturers do that. Everybody, Chinese, Russia, everybody does that. When you understand that there are backdoors in everything, then you kind of understand, well, that's why all these companies want to be the top dog. Because if I'm an American company and I'm selling my telecom equipment to all these different other countries and businesses all over the world, my backdoors are in everything, so I can spy on whoever I want. It's very similar to weapons manufacturing. the U.S. is a big arms manufacturer, France is a big arms manufacturer, the U.K. is a big arms manufacturer, Russia's an arms manufacturer. Everybody's building weapons, and they're selling them to whoever will buy them, of course, because, they want to make money. But there's another aspect to it, kind of similar to a back door. If you're building a missile system, you want to sell your missile system to everyone else. And the reason you want to do that is because they generally include friend or foe identification systems. Well, first of all, if I am a country and I make a missile system, I'm going to sell a missile system with the same name to that country over there, but it's not exactly the same thing. It's slightly crippled. And then on top of it, it has this friend or foe identification system. So the reason I want everyone to use my missiles is because if they're all using the missiles that I sold to them, those missile launchers can never be used to shoot down my airplanes, for example. So that's why America wants everyone to use its missiles. And that's why Russia wants everyone to use its missiles. And that's why some smart countries have actually purchased both. Because they'll say, well, yeah, America, we like your missiles. And yeah, Russia, yours are pretty cool too, so we'll just buy both of them. And then everybody freaks out, and there's all this nonsense on TV about this country's evil and that country's evil. And there are very practical, technical reasons why countries do that. So anyway, it's very similar to this friend or foe identification. It's with telecom equipment. Everybody wants you to use their stuff because then it has their back doors, and isn't that glorious? Now, getting back to Huawei smartphones, of course, it kind of makes logical sense, because if you're the US government and your government employees are using Huawei smartphones and you think China might be spying on you, well, of course, you shouldn't use it. But as sort of a normal person, it's a little bit ridiculous to say, don't use a Huawei smartphone because China is spying on you. Because it's like, look, if I'm an American and I live in Texas and I have a Huawei smartphone, that smartphone is actually running Android, which is a Google operating system, which, as I mentioned earlier, you can watch my other video about how Google hoovers up all the data, sends it off. Google's kind of in bed with, intelligence agencies, naturally, because, they have their finger on all this data that's flying around. So, of course, all the intelligence agencies want to get in on the action, and Google lets them, and there you go. So you've got a Huawei smartphone, and it's running Google's Android, and it's already spying on you. Now, if you're an American, and you have this phone, and you're living in Texas, i.e. in America, especially considering the current social climate where everyone is being offended and you can lose your job if you say the wrong things and all this kind of stuff, it's like, well, hang on a minute. You're actually far more threatened by the agencies of your own country than you are of China. Because you're an American, you're living in Texas, you have a Huawei smartphone. Okay, Google's spying on you, which means the agencies of your own country are spying on you, and there's a Chinese spy agency that's also spying on you. Who cares? You're far more likely to actually get into some sort of trouble or have problems because you are a citizen of your own country using a device that is sending all this data off to the authorities in your own country. If it's also sending that data off to China, well, who cares? I mean, if you say, you're talking on your smartphone and you say that you think that the president of China is a fanny face, okay. I mean, do you think that they're hoovering up that data and then China's going to send like a crack team of Chinese James Bond agents, halfway around the world to like kidnap you in your sleep and take you off to some underground Chinese dungeon where you'll be brainwashed into thinking that communism is great or something? I mean, it's a little bit, like I say, if you're a government employee, you can kind of understand, because there's constantly spy versus spy. And of course, data security is especially important for people like government employees, right? But as like a normal citizen end user, it just doesn't make much sense. And of course you can say, well, yeah, but I don't care that Google's spying on me because I'm not a criminal and, I'm doing nothing wrong, so let them have all my data. Well, if you say that, then you should say the exact same thing about China spying on you, because what could they possibly... They don't care about you. They really don't care about you. So, whereas, of course, the agencies of your own country might care about you if you're saying something that they don't like. If you're saying something that the Chinese don't like, they're on the other side of the world. They got like 1 billion people to monitor and do. They got their own problems to take care of. They don't care what some stupid American is saying on the other side of the planet. Stupid from their perspective, of course. Maybe. So, yeah, that's kind of funny. Then, of course, you hear that China is stealing our technology. And, yeah, the answer to that is basically yes and no. If you've watched, for example, the Silicon Valley TV show, that gave kind of a very good example of if you're the little guy and you come up with some great idea, there's always some bigger corporation, in your same country that's perfectly willing to rip your idea off and then modify it slightly and release it as their own thing, and you get basically screwed over while they make tons of money. That kind of stealing of things and corporate espionage and that kind of thing, like that happens all the time. And of course it also happens between countries. More than that, like everything is made in China. Everything. Like take an iPhone. When you manufacture and when you design an iPhone, the iPhone is designed in California and all that kind of stuff, and then they have them manufactured in China. The thing about that is it's not like they're a bunch of like mindless Chinese slaves who are manufacturing this phone. Like you can't build something as complex as a smartphone without actually understanding what's going on. You may not know all the details of the A26 mega processor inside, but you certainly have to have like armies of engineers and technicians who understand and can put this device together and test it according to how it's supposed to work, how you specify that it works, blah, blah, blah. But the point is that, there are a bunch of people who sit on the assembly line and they put parts together, but they can't do that until there's some, there's a whole lot of smarty pants engineers that make all of that happen. More than that, you also have to consider that, say, like you're in the U.S., if you've ever worked as an engineer, there are many, 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 many engineers who get visas and come and study in the U.S., and then they work for the same company that you're working for. And, they come because they want to start a new life in the U.S., and, of course, the companies like them because they can pay them less, because they say, oh, well, we have to give you a visa so you won't make as much money, and so it's basically cheap labor. But many of the best engineers come from China, they come from Russia, they come from many Asian countries, India. There are a lot of really smart engineers, and that's the other reason they hire them, is because they're extremely competent. So obviously not all of them, just like not all American or European engineers are geniuses or something, but the point is that a country like China, with such a huge population, even just statistically, they have a massive number of really smart people. So, yeah, they don't really need to steal everything. Certainly they do, just like we do and just like everyone else does. But they wouldn't even necessarily need to. And, yeah, they're definitely smart enough to make a fifth-generation stealth aircraft and, like, all that kind of stuff, and missiles and all that stuff, and they don't need just cardboard mock-ups because, yeah, they got enough people and they got enough smarts they could do it. So, stealing, yeah, everybody's stealing from everybody. So that's kind of a weak argument. According to several reports, the Chinese economy is slated to become the world's #1 economy in just a few short years, which obviously has a lot of people crapping their pants, and it has nothing to do with technology. In fact, there's a Chinese conglomerate that actually owns 49.9% of the Toulouse airport, which is my local airport. I live in southwestern France, and in the city of Toulouse, the airport is owned 49.9% by, essentially, China, or a Chinese corporation. China is also investing heavily in Africa, and even the Washington Post, of all media outlets, came out and said, yeah, they're not really trying to colonize. Of course, they were saying this because they're against, whatever. In any case, they said, this Washington Post article, they say, well, China's not really trying to colonize or be evil in Africa. It's simple globalization, and they're going in and they're funding roads, and they're doing it just like, it's all capitalism. You go in and you say, well, you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. Our corporations are making lots of money. Are they being evil about it? Are we always holy? Are our Western corporations always holy? No, obviously not. Not if Google is hoovering up all your data. So basically the world is changing. That's in a nutshell. And all of this is, for more political reasons, because certain countries are up and coming and they're, economically or militarily more powerful, and then other countries in, the U.S. and North America and Europe, they don't like that, so they're just doing it. And because of these sort of political reasons, suddenly it's like they'll focus on the technology and say, no, don't use their 5G network, and don't use this, and don't use that. And it's the same in the military sphere. This country's threatening that country, don't use their weapons or we'll sanction you, and blah, blah, blah. And it's all because the world is simply changing. And that's it, I think it has very little to do with the actual technology involved and more to do with simple politics. I don't use a smartphone anymore. I have a dumb phone. I like my Nokia 3310. But if I was going to get a smartphone, I would probably get a Huawei, because they're cheaper, they're fancier, they work, they're good quality, and simply economically speaking, why would you buy, if this oscilloscope here, this is a Regal, it's a Chinese brand. If you buy a Tektronix oscilloscope, this little bad boy here, a couple thousand, this thing's a few hundred. I mean, it's perfectly good. I use it all the time. It's great. It's accurate. It's, why would I spend several thousand when I can buy the Chinese version and it's fine. It's great. And that's going to continue happening. Countries like China are going to go around and they're going to help other countries develop, and they're going to do their own thing, and there's not much anybody can do about it. So, yeah. That's pretty much it. It's not really about the spying, and it's not really, everybody's spying on everybody. It's not really about the technology being evil. It's all pretty much political, and all these technological aspects. The technology is basically being used as the excuse for political arguments, if you will. And it's all pretty ridiculous. So, for more techie tips, see ScottiesTech.Info. Thanks for watching. See you next time.